Ever since the release of its first season back in June of 2012, it didn't take long for Longmire to become one of the most popular Western mysteries of the A&E network. And with its many intertwining story arcs acted out on a tremendous cast of characters, it's really no wonder that the Netflix subscribers are currently hoping for a 7th season. But if the franchise was to get renewed by the streaming giant, which only recently acquired the rights to the show, who would the fans want to return at the end of the day? Well, whether you're a Longmire fanatic or just want to know more about what the general public thinks of the characters that made the series, stay right where you are, as we're about to explore some of the most loved and hated characters of the franchise. So strap yourselves in, get ready for an informative ride as things are about to get exciting. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on any of the new videos we post. Number 1. Sheriff Walter Longmire. First up on our list and taking the position of the most loved character of Longmire is none other than Sheriff Walter Longmire, as brought to life by the broody Robert Taylor. As the leading man of the franchise, not much needs to be said about how he was able to take this position from the rest of the cast members. Since the events of the series are very much seen through his perspective, the audience learns a lot more about him than the other characters, leading to an almost visceral reaction when he is down in the dumps because of something that has happened. It's a trope that all franchises depend on. You can't exactly have the leading character of your show be unlikable, after all. But when it comes to Sheriff Longmire, there's a lot more than that, which makes him such an impressive man. When we were first introduced to him, we see that he's become a bit distant from both his job and daughter due to the death of his wife, who he loved with all his heart. Like Jim Hopper from Stranger Things franchise, he starts off in a terrible situation with viewers wondering if they can ever come to love him as much as the show wants them to. But then he starts to develop as a character. He reveals himself as a renegade of a sheriff who's willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that justice is done. And it's for that reason that the majority of his victims refer to him as a cowboy cop. He also speaks to the older generation by living in accordance with some principles that would be strange even for millennials. A great example of this is the fact that he believes that cell phones are useless. Throughout the entirety of the series, he refuses to use one, instead choosing to communicate through the use of his police radio and walkie. Walt can also be said to be an ethical man. As much as he wants justice to be done, he puts the cowboy aspect of his persona on the back burner whenever he's about to cross a line of no return, ensuring that he does not one day become the scum that he works so hard to punish. Viewers of the show also described him as loyal, detail-oriented, and thoughtful. That being said, his incredible abilities as a sheriff causes him to hold his deputies to an impossibly high standard, which often leads to some conflict along the way. He's also very set in his ways, which the majority of us can relate to. In other words, Sheriff Longmire is the person we all want to be, so it really shouldn't surprise you that he takes the number 1 spot by a long shot. Number 2, Deputy Victoria Moretti. Speaking of the deputies that help Sheriff Longmire keep Absaroka County safe, Deputy Victoria Moretti finds herself next up on our list. Having moved to the country from Philadelphia, where she had previously taken the position of a homicide detective in the big city, doesn't take long for Vic to make a home for herself at Sheriff Longmire's side. Using her incredible skills of deduction, she quickly becomes Walt's right-hand man, and since Sheriff Longmire respects her, we can't help but do the same. The viewer also comes to love the fact that she's a woman of action who's more than willing to take the fight to the enemy if the situation calls for it. She also gives off the impression that she is still getting used to the Absaroka lifestyle, which makes sense since she was always a city girl. It's a trait that's pretty relatable to the majority of viewers who have at one point or another felt like they didn't fit into the society they were born in. That discomfort and anxiety we're all filled with from time to time is shared by her, which makes us want the deputy to succeed both at her job and in life. She also slowly starts to adapt the deadpan personality and snark that Sheriff Longmire often speaks with, which makes her even more likable at the end of the day. The great thing about Vic is that she's actually portrayed by Katie Sackhoff, who in interviews has mentioned just how similar she is to Deputy Moretti. According to her, they both have a desire to be the best that they could possibly be at their job, but suffer from a dark and troubled past, which has led them to believe that they're bad luck for the other people in their lives. And while it may be a tad sad that Katie often feels this way, it's done wonders for the raw emotion that her character is often asked to portray. And honestly, we believe it's this overall sense of realism that adds to the allure of Deputy Deputy Moretti, and also come to learn that Vic is outgoing, capable, compassionate, and highly energetic, which are all qualities we would like to include when describing ourselves. The only real problem with Vic is that she's both impulsive and rash in her decisions. Even though her intentions are always in the right place, she tends to act before she thinks of the consequences, which at times can be quite dire. She also has a tendency to suffer from emotional issues and instabilities, which she chooses to repress rather than deal with, causing her to blow up on those she loves. She's only human though, which is why she still takes the number 2 spot. Number 3, Deputy Branch Connolly. Next up on our list is someone who finds himself in the very middle when it comes to likability. We are, of course, referring to Deputy Branch Connolly, as portrayed by the brilliant Bailey Chase. For those of you who have forgotten, Branch is actually an ambitious deputy from one of the wealthiest families in Absaroka. This already leads to him taking a few hits when it comes to likability, as his spoiled attitude often comes out and doesn't allow the viewer to relate to him and the life he's lived. That being said, his ambition is definitely something that we can all get on board with. Regardless of how much he still needs to learn on the job, he is dead set on becoming the next sheriff of Absaroka County. He does, however, start his journey by doing some very questionable things. A great example of this is when he kidnapped a local peyote dealer and dosed him with his own supply. This was a massive circumvention of protocol, leading Branch to ask his friends perjure themselves in an attempt to save his own bacon. He's also found himself conducting illegal searches of personal information, such as when he snooped in on Vic's personal laptop to prove that he was right. In other words, when it comes to Deputy Connolly, we have the true example of a man that's willing to do whatever it takes to make a name for himself, regardless of how illegal it might be. Not exactly the best trait to have when you're an actual lawman of the county, mind you. But although many will describe him as a bit of a jerk, it must be said that overall the man has a heart of gold. His intentions are always in the right place, even though he is sometimes a lot more rash than his counterpart Vic. He's also been described by viewers as outgoing, people-oriented, and charming, which shows why especially the ladies have an affinity for his character. He is, after all, the character who is most likely to be seen without a shirt on. But in all honesty, if we had a body like him, we'd probably do the same. So when he landed up dead back at the beginning of season 4, it goes without saying that there were quite a few sad audience members shedding a tear. Number 4, Eddie Harp. On the other side of the spectrum, though, we have Eddie Harp, who is brought to life by the villainous Dan Donahue. He's referred to as the dragon to the Irish mob boss Shane Muldoon, and makes waves by being one of the biggest bads of season 5 of the franchise. What's worse is that he doesn't seem to have any good qualities about him. When Sheriff Longmire discovers that he's been sending checks to his parents over all these years, he tries to talk the mob man down from a standoff by mentioning that there must be some good left in him. Otherwise, he wouldn't waste time trying to take care of what is left of his family. But then we learn that the only reason he's been sending checks to his parents is to teach them a lesson. As it turns out, the bank account linked to the checks has always been empty. So when his parents really get strapped for cash and go to rely on the checks, there'll be absolutely nothing there for him. It's one of the dirtiest things we could ever imagine someone doing to their family. So when the mob finally offs him to prevent any sort of testimony, we couldn't help but cheer for joy. What do you think? Let us know in the comments section down below.